All right. So today my goal is to provide a backgrounder of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I'm hoping that I might spark interest among this group. But more so, like my major goal is that you'd be better informed of our work in the community. Um, Oops, I'm just getting an error message over here. Oh, there we go. Um, I'm also hoping that you, in being better informed, will be equipped to help spread the word among your circles and in the community about some of our needs, or maybe that you might want to get involved if it's in your capacity. So I'll be presenting a lot of information today, and I guess my hope is that some of it sticks with you. Different things stick with different people. And I hope you don't mind. I'll be approaching this kind of casually and conversationally. And I'll try to stay within the allotted time frame. I think I have a big window, so that shouldn't be a problem. Okay. All right. So your key takeaways that I'm hoping for is that you understand that there's a great need across our communities, and furthermore, why. Understanding that if you have the desire to volunteer, give back, how you can. And I mentioned, I'm hoping that you'll be better informed so that you can help to share a message if anyone asks among your networks, among grandchildren, among nieces and nephews or neighbors. So if someone approaches you and says, I mean, it's not like everyone approaches people and says, hey, I'm thinking about volunteering. But if that comes up in conversation, maybe we'll be top of mind and you can help us spread our word. So today we'll be talking about who we are, who we serve, our volunteer need, our organizational need as a whole, some frequently asked questions, and the future of Big Brothers Big Sisters. All right. So I wanted to provide you with a little bit of Big Brothers Big Sisters 101. Off the hop in this section, I'd like you to know that Big Brothers Big Sisters has commonly been perceived by the community as a whole as being sort of a nice to have. And having a big brother, big sister, or a mentor, someone that you see weekly, is a nice to have. But further, we don't want to be perceived as that nice to have as we always have. We think that mentoring is a need to have, and I want to share with you why. So here's our mission. Our mission is to enable life-changing mentoring relationships to ignite the power and potential of young people. And our vision is that all young people realize their full potential. So all of the decisions that we make as an organization come back to our mission and our vision, which would be true for any organization. But it comes back to how can we best serve the kids in our community, everything we do. Okay, so I wanted to show you the history of our organization, and this is what I was chatting about a little bit earlier when I mentioned, I'll tell you how we became serving Grand Erie, Halton, and Hamilton. So on this slide, I'll point you to firstly 1913. So we're over 100 years old as an organization all across Canada. And so there's about 100 different affiliates across Canada. Next, I want to point you to 2009, 2018, and 22 as important dates. So in 2009 is when the Grand Erie organizations formed, uniting multiple agencies within the region. And then skipping ahead to 2022, most recently is when Halton and Hamilton and Grand Erie amalgamated. So the reason for this amalgamation was to create efficiencies. And through the pandemic, when there was limitations with our services, is when we realized more or less that by partnering with agencies that had more limited resources, we could be much stronger together. And I think actually that was one of the taglines of the year 2020. We're bigger together, and we certainly ended up being bigger together. So now we have quite a large service delivery region. Okay, and here's some historical photos I wanted to share just because they're so fun. So these are some photos throughout the years, and you'll notice that in all the photos, they're male presenting individuals. This would be because well, these are from archives of the Hamilton office, which I'm originally from, and we only amalgamated with Big Sisters about 25 years ago, and all of these photos are prior to. Okay, moving along. Wanted to present some stats so you can understand our impact in the community. And while these are 2022 stats, our stats for 2023 would be similar. So in terms of youth mentored, 1,691. Youth enrolled in our group programs, which we mentored the most children in group programs. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. 1,335. Youth enrolled in one-to-one. That's the longest standing and most recognizable program of our agency, the Big Brother, Big Sister program, 365. And we do all that with nearly 1,100 mentors. Okay, and here's a list of all of the different communities that we serve. So there's 12 different communities. With Acton, Brant County, Brantford, Burlington, Georgetown, Haldeman County, Hamilton, Milton, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Norfolk County, Oakville, and Six Nations of the Grand River. So we have a huge geographical footprint, and that's as recent as 2022. I promise there'll be less stats coming as we go. This is just Big Brothers, Big Sisters 101, as I mentioned. Okay, and in terms of our reach and partnerships, important for you to know, especially because later on I'm going to tell you more about our needs in community. We have partnerships with over 100 schools in the region. So on the slide, it says 99. The current number is 115 partnerships. So every school board that is around, we're in schools in those communities. All right. So who do we serve? So I'm going to spend a lot more time in this section helping you to understand the children and families that we serve in our community. So this part of the presentation is going to help you understand why mentoring is a need to have versus a nice to have. So the issue at hand in our local communities is that there are many children and youth who are struggling with barriers and adversities in their lives that are much out of their control. So children are dealing with traditional challenges that, are part of growing up, but in fact, these challenges grow much deeper. So I'm going to introduce you to a term that you may or may not be aware of, adverse childhood experiences. So these are forms of trauma that often lead to toxic or long-term toxic stress and or mental illness. So our work is informed through research surrounded by adverse childhood experiences. So first, we're just going to understand as a group, we're going to dive into ACEs is what we call them. So if I throw out ACEs, that's what I'm talking about, not cards. Okay, so here, the grouping of ACEs are emotional, social, or economic. So here's a listing. We have abuse, neglect, mental health, an absent parent, high-risk behavior, socioeconomic barriers, victimization, witnessing violence, or bullying. So this list continues. There's about 27 different forms of traumas in total that we count as ACEs. So with young people that are referred to our organization, either by a parent, guardian, caseworker, principal, school teacher, they're incurring more than one, more than two, typically on average, children that come into our programs, 3 to 5 adversities they're facing. So we know also that children that are dealing with a higher number of ACEs and a longer term exposure, they're more likely to have long-term health implications. So again, the higher number of traumas that a child is dealing with and the longer amount of time means the long-term outcomes might not be favorable. And this is often because these traumas don't go away on their own. Resilience is created through relationships. I'll continue to get into this, but yeah, so this is an important connection to make, and just wanted to let you know the type of young people that would be enrolled in our programs. And then there's this stat that awakens me and the importance of what we do all the time. So youth facing adversity are 2 to 3 times more likely than their peers to reach adulthood without a single mentor. That's alarming. So the people who need it most are often less likely to receive mentorship. Okay. And now I wanted to introduce you to Dr. Nadine Burke. So she, here's a quote from her: "Childhood trauma is not just something you get over as an adult." So our work is informed by decades of research. And so now you know, because I've told you, but I'll also show you a video in just a moment um, to help you understand that childhood trauma is not just something that you get over. So if we know that children facing adversity are 2 to 3 times more likely than their peers to reach adulthood without a mentor, and then we know that childhood trauma is not just something you get over, we're called to action. And that's sort of Big Brothers Big Sisters as a whole across the country. We're research informed, and we have been for a couple of decades, following the importance of mentorship. And yeah, so this is Dr. Nadine Burke. We're going to pause here and watch a little video from her. But she identifies that childhood trauma has lifetime health implications in some cases. And so she'll link toxic stress and mental health issues to, okay, so some health implications like heart disease actually and diabetes could be linked to toxic stress that's incurred from reoccurring trauma. She is the doctor, though, however, and she speaks just a little bit better about the connection and link. So we're just going to watch a snippet here of this video. And whoops, is my screen pause sharing? Stop sharing. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try to do this as quick as possible. Oh, geez. I'm sorry. I had it all ready to go, but you know, under the pressure, these, is that it? Got it? No, here it is. Can you see my screen? Okay. Okay, so we're gonna watch about 6 minutes of this, just so you know. And here we go. I'm just gonna ask for a thumbs up that you can hear the volume. Can you hear the volume? No. Okay. Can you hear the volume now?
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or a packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities, access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, Dr. Burke, have you seen this? In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Onda at the CDC. And together, they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of 7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, you know, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children.
I just love Dr. Nadine, and I will share the link to the full TED Talk so you can view the rest later if you'd like. I personally love the connection that she makes. And if you have never thought about or weren't aware of, the possible links between adversity and long-term health implications, there's lots of science behind it. And so that's where and why mentorship becomes so important, and why we start pointing to the need to have versus a nice to have. I'm going to just once again get back into sharing my screen. Just a moment. Okay, slide. Oh, where'd y'all go? Is it? Perfect. All right, so at the same time that we're learning from research in adverse childhood experiences, we know from other research institutions that nothing has more of an impact in the life of a child than positive relationships. So here we have the Search Institute, a mentoring organization that tells us after decades of forming hypotheses, conducting surveys, crafting and rewriting definitions, analyzing data, writing journals, journal articles, researching, we arrived at nothing. Nothing has more of an impact in the life of a child than positive relationships. And then from Harvard, the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. So I bet you didn't think of all this when you thought about Big Brothers, Big Sisters, but this is the big link on the importance of not only Big Brothers, Big Sisters as an organization, but the importance of mentoring organizations for the developing brain and children who are in their formative years, especially those who are facing trauma. All right, so here's the link then. So who do we serve? We have young people who are facing adversity and in need of a developmental relationship. And then, so we connect them with mentors. That's how we ignite potential. And then at the bottom, I can also send this as a one-pager for you to review because I'm not going to read through all of it. But then we have the outcomes. So the outcomes that pour out of these mentorship or mentoring relationships is social emotional competence, mental health and well-being, educational engagement, and employment readiness. So these are some of the outcomes we see on the other end of these mentoring relationships. I mentioned developmental relationships, and so they are a stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or adult. So this is the ultimate link and connection between the research and what Big Brothers Big Sisters does. We help to provide these developmental relationships. And this is our mentorship model. So together, the family, the organization, and the mentor, we create that relationship that's so important for a positive outcome and development of a child facing adversity. We call it the power of three. All right, so now I wanted to jump into letting you know a little bit more about our volunteer need. Now you know why it's so important, and now I'll just let you know the state of our organization. So locally, we do have 200 young people who are waiting for a mentor. And more. So I wanted to also tell you about our programs. We have community-based and site-based programs. We continue to evolve our programs based on the needs of our targeted beneficiaries. So some of our targeted beneficiaries would be BIPOC youth, newcomer youth, youth who are within the 2SL GTBQ communities. So we're listening to the needs of our community and developing programs. In the first slide, or one of the first slides I shared, I showed you that we have highest numbers of children served in our group mentoring programs. So some of the programs within them be Go Girls, that's hosted at local schools in our communities, and it encourages healthy minds and healthy bodies. Or we have a program for newcomer youth that helps them to meet new friends who are also newcomer youth, and it helps them practice English language skills as well. So these are some of the programs that maybe folks in the community are unaware of, as you would just typically think of a big brother or a big sister. So we do have lots of great programs at local sites. I wanted to highlight the in-school mentoring program quickly. It's a elementary school-based program, and so the mentors meet on site at a local school with the mentees for 1 hour once a week for the duration of the school year. So I wanted to point you to this program. It's a great way for individuals who may want to volunteer to support young people and may have time to give back during the day. So together, you would do activities like, well, you'd find your common interests first, but it's social and recreational activities like board games, crafts, playing cards. But more important than the hanging out and playing games, it's the intrinsic properties that the mentoring relationship offers. So it's that showing up consistently, being someone who's there to listen, building that developmental relationship. So again, pointing back to the, it is a nice to have. Yes, playing checkers is a really nice thing to do on a Wednesday afternoon. But the need, it's the need to have for a child who's facing adversity. It's helping to step out of some of those challenges and the long-term benefits. That's the importance of Big Brothers Big Sisters. So next, I wanted to just debunk some myths of our organization and provide some answers to some frequently asked questions. All right, so here are some common misconceptions about our organization. Is that we're well-funded, we have ample volunteer resources, or that it's a huge time commitment. So in a slide just a couple ago, I shared that we have 200 young people waiting. So certainly we do have a huge volunteer need. All right, and some frequently asked questions. So what are our current needs? Volunteers for our school-based programs is one of our priorities currently. So I mentioned closer to the beginning that we have relationships with local schools, over 100 schools. So we're running programs during the day and after school that might be one-to-one or group programs. And so I'm not just telling you as a group to run out and fill out an application on our website. But again, if in your networks you are chatting with someone and they're talking about their interest in getting involved in the community in some capacity, maybe you could point them to our website and they can learn more about our programs. So male identifying mentors is also a current need. That's always a need for us. We seem to have more women volunteer applicants than men. And we also have a Bowl for Kids' Sake event coming up in March 2024. I'll post a slide with our website at the end. So if you like bowling and you like getting together as a team for fun, this could be something, a fun way to support our organization. Okay, some other frequently asked questions. Why do you need to raise funds if you're supported by volunteers? As I was just telling you about our bowling event, which is one of our major fundraisers. So we, child safety and quality mentoring programs require fully trained case management staff, which I'm sure you can appreciate. Like any business, we have overhead and administrative costs. And I last wanted to point to how proud we are of the outcomes and the number of children that we serve with such a minimal staff. So we have a staff of under 25, and we're serving over 1,600 young people in the community. That's a pretty good return, I'd say. All right, so how can I get involved or offer support? So you can become a volunteer mentor, you could participate in an upcoming event, or you can help spread the word about our organization. I'm so grateful that you're able to listen and understand and learn more about our organization today, because even being more equipped or just understanding further the impact of our organization helps you be able to share some of our impact in the community. The next quick section, I want to tell you about the future of our organization. Mentioned very briefly that we're little led, so we're listening to and working with the youth in our community to develop and implement new programs. So again, these are BIPOC youth, newcomer youth, youth from the 2SL LGBTQ, Two-Spirit Plus communities. And so we're expanding our programs to better serve these targeted beneficiaries. We're forming strategic partnerships and working collaboratively with industry experts to help with wraparound services, because we understand that mentoring doesn't provide all the solutions and answers. So if we work with partners in the community who are mental health experts, we can refer our children there. Mentoring is not the prescription that solves everything. So that's why we're working with community experts. And so, within the next couple of years, there will be a national brand change on the horizon. So we might look and be called something different. So we're rebranding ourselves nationally to remove ourselves from the binary representation that we currently hold. So we want to better reflect the inclusivity of our organization as a whole. All right. So I'm just gonna, oh dear. I'll land on this slide as the last one. So for more information about us, mentorsforkids.ca, that's where you'll find all the information and more about what I might have talked about. And thank you. Thank you everyone for listening, for your time. I hope that you learned or you took something today, and I know for sure you probably know more than you came to this presentation with. So thank you for your time.